emotion needs to be created by the story. And why is this so important? Because emotions arrange our memory. So what has high emotional content will define how fast we can recover and retrieve the memory from our brains.
The memory from our brain. And this is very important now. Because we actually live on the memories now. It helps us to shape us. Because here is history. Is the experience of the past. We have not been there, but this is the experience of our fathers before our fathers. By learning these things, it helps us to sort of shape ourselves in the present and also in the kind of future that we are going ahead. But you did make mention of the fact before that most of this story, when I was making mention of BMW, Fiat, or maybe Ferrari, of course, looking at the car industries in Europe, that maybe some of this story might not actually be there in the public eyes. I don't know if I get you correctly. So this story that we are talking about, is it something that somebody from the outside can easily access, or is it only kept for the company as part of the company's secrecy and part of the family? Can you say anything about that and why it might be that case?
So the family story is only for the family. It has no place in the company. That is something that should also be used for marketing. Bits and pieces, yes, but obviously the emotional hardships and what have you, and all these critical points are not, in my mind, for the public eye. You would use that story, that family story, to create a version for the public eye. But I wanted to take up what you said earlier, because this is very important about stories that we inherit. Through transgenerational epigenetics, they have found that actually stories that we not even have lived through are being given to by our parents. So meaning parents make experiences that changes the gene expressions, and these changed gene expressions are then being transmitted to the next generation. So if the parent generation has post-traumatic stress syndrome, the next generation will be will show a high susceptibility to stress. And that also happens in families. So the past generations are very important to understand, where it gets harder and harder. But that is one element that we come to see the light of the world with. And the other part is obviously when we grow up, what we observe, what our experiences are completely and entirely unmediated by the prefrontal cortex, which is kind of that part of the brain that allows us to think logically. And so our brain is being shaped by what we inherit in terms of stories, and the stories we then learn through our experience. And these are all things that are divisive for how we behave, how we interpret information. But the good thing is it is malleable, and storytelling is a way of changing the shape of the brain, of the wiring of the connections, right? And that's why it's so important to have this storytelling and creating the narrative fragment inventory, because this is where all these stories come to life in a very aware matter, because there's also the saying, what we are aware of, we can manage. What we're not aware of manages us. And this is the same for families. So it's a very important work to be done, and to clear everything out, which is a relief for each individual in the family, and then coming together through that cohesive story, which is very engaging, that keeps a family, that synchronizes a family, and keeps it synchronized once the family is also happy to do the work and do the interpretation.
I'm looking for a kind of a case study. Is there a company that you know of that maybe have used storytelling correctly, who maybe we can look up to and say, okay, this is a good example of a company that use storytelling the right way, in your view?
I don't know of any. So it would be interesting to use that narrative process and see what such a family would think of the process and how it impacts the system. So it would be an experiment.
So in essence, we don't have any case study like that we can share, right?
So I don't have any. I'm sure there are families that do a very good storytelling. There are families who are incredibly well organized. And it is maybe not the way I have described how they created their story. But there are families out there that do an incredible good job at keeping the family together.
Now, in terms of the story that we tell ourselves, are there maybe the good story that we should tell, and maybe some of them that we can avoid for the sake of the family business, or should we just tell any type of story? I'm trying to understand your take on that.
I don't think it's any kind of story, and every story that we tell ourselves is an emergent property from stories from the outside and from the stories we carry. And the stories we carry is in our memory, and our memory is not a filing cabinet. It's basically we retrieve bits and pieces from the cortex, and while remembering already interpreting the past experience. And then we edit it, then we use it, and then we put it back into the memory, and the re-encoding again is subject to interpretation. So stories are changing all the time, but this is how we roll, and that's why the storytelling works for individuals and for social systems in families, but also in a wider social context.
Okay. I remember in the beginning, you did make mention of behavioral economics. No, this is one of the areas where you are an expert. I don't know if that can have any influence or any impact on storytelling in terms of family businesses.
Oh yes, of course. Why is that? Because in behavioral economics, there are over 150 biases that have been detected, which means 150 cases where human beings in experimental settings have evidenced that they are not making rational decisions. So, meaning we listen to many stories that actually using these biases that influence our decisions. So yeah, it's again from a different side, from a different angle, showing you that storytelling works better than any logical deduction of a decision. And by the way, when it comes to decisions, they have found that actually we make decisions about 350 milliseconds before we actually realize we made this decision. And what we do then is actually we engage in post-rationalization. And there are other studies that actually even show you that when it comes to conscious decision-making and logical thinking, it's actually 95 to 99% that we're not logical, that we are not conscious of our decisions because they are routine decisions. This is also why biases work, because we need shortcuts, right? So if we would calculate each and everything from scratch, imagine brushing your teeth and going out the door. Well, when you have to calculate everything from scratch, you wouldn't leave the door in the morning. So it is these fast decisions that we need to make, and it is also something for our survival, right? Because you have a situation, you can't spend hours thinking it through. You just make a decision fast, and this is where the biases come in.